Today is Thursday, not Monday, and it's finally 2020, not 2019, which means the election year has begun. In the first contest, the Iowa caucuses, now just 32 days away. We start this new year with Joe Biden continuing to lead in the polls, according to the Real Clear Politics average. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren holding down second and third places, respectively. They are the only other candidates in double digits. Pete Buttigieg and Michael Bloomberg right now rounding out the top five. But when you look at the money race, it's a different story. Sanders, Buttigieg, Biden, and Andrew Yang leading the battle of the bucks. Also, the field got a little smaller today as Julian Castro dropped out of the race. The former HUD secretary had failed to gain traction in the polls or in the fundraising department. Joining us now to discuss all things 2020, Democratic Strategist Jason Nichols. Jason, Julian Castro is out of the race. I want to get your thoughts on his exit, why he or anyone would get out now that we're just a month away from Iowa. Also, your thoughts about the shrinking representation of candidates of color left in the race, particularly as the party becomes increasingly reliant on voters of color.
Well, I think Julian Castro got out of the race. Why many people get out of the race? Because they run out of money. I think he did not have the fundraising power nor the voter support that he needed to continue. It's a shame because he was a candidate who brought up the concerns of a large constituency within the party, and particularly people of color. And he was a decent candidate. And I will say this, that I don't necessarily think we've seen the last of Julian Castro, particularly if Elizabeth Warren is able to pull it out. I think he makes a very good running mate for Warren. He's a person of color. He's from Texas. He might actually be able to make Texas purple or blue. And I think he's an attack dog, and that's the kind of person that you want as your running mate. Now, as far as the shrinking number of people of color, perhaps, there was a situation where you had a bunch of candidates of color and their constituents couldn't necessarily get behind one of them, and they split up the number of people. The other thing is that Joe Biden is very popular because of his connection to the most popular man in politics, and that's Barack Obama. So he's got the support of older African Americans in particular, and that's something that's helped him throughout this process.
Jason, given the importance of voters of color to Democratic chances and the fact that they need a big turnout on Election Day, add to the fact that it's looking almost certain that the Democratic nominee will be white, do Democrats need to nominate a person of color for vice president? Is that enough to boost turnout? And how else can the party ensure non-white voter turnout?
Well, I think one of the things that people always seem to mix up is that they think African Americans and Latinos vote based on the color of people's skin. Now, I'm from Maryland, and I'll tell you, we've had plenty of conservative Black candidates who were actually decent, people with long records like Alan Keyes or like Michael Steele, and they never get Black support because Black people don't vote directly on people's skin color. They vote on issues. And I think it's almost insulting that people think that Black people and people of color, Latinos, vote based on ethnicity or skin color and use this racial reasoning rather than voting what they think their interests are. Some crusty old white guys always win in Maryland because Black people think that they are going to respect their interests. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the issue. But I do think that younger voters want to see a young person on the ticket. They would like to see some diversity because it seems as though, like you said, they depend on their votes, but don't want to include them. So I do think, there probably will be, particularly a woman, on the ticket if you have a Buttigieg administration or a Buttigieg nomination, or if you have a Biden nomination or Bernie Sanders nomination. I think, honestly, if you see someone like Biden, Stacey Abrams makes a perfect candidate for vice president for him.
I want to get to some of the fundraising numbers now from the fourth quarter, and Joe Biden reporting $23 million in the fourth quarter, his strongest quarter of the race so far. What does that say about Biden's position, and can we put any debate to rest? He is the front runner among the Democrats?
I think he is definitely the front runner. But I actually think that people are underestimating Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the most consistent. He's got his 20% in all of the early states. So I think Bernie Sanders is going to be a lot more formidable than people think. This is not going to be a coronation. This is going to be a difficult road for Biden and for Warren and Buttigieg to challenge Bernie Sanders because of his consistency. He's going to come in second or maybe even first in a lot of states and garner a lot of momentum and strength. I don't think, honestly, fundraising numbers in terms of the total really makes a whole lot of difference. And this is, again, where Bernie Sanders is strong. It's the amount of donors you have. Bernie Sanders, his average donations, I think this time around, he says it's $18 per donation. If you have a bunch of wealthy people donating the maximum amount, that doesn't mean as much as having a bunch of people who may be cash strapped still believing in you enough to give you $18. So I think that is what it's going to come down to, is the amount of donors you have rather than the total amount of money you have to spend. Michael Bloomberg, you're up there in New York, and Michael Bloomberg has a ton of money. He's going to have more money than any of these people, but it doesn't matter because I don't think he has the support.
We got strong fourth quarter numbers in terms of fundraising from Sanders, Buttigieg, and Yang. On Sanders and Buttigieg, they're strong on the money, and the money trends. They're trending well. Strong in the polls, and their polls are trending well. But I also got to think that those are two candidates the Trump campaign would love to face. Sanders, they can paint as a socialist. Buttigieg as inexperienced, and yes, they will seek to use his sexuality against him. Given that beating Trump is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 issue among every Democrat you talk to, how do you square the successes so far of Sanders and Buttigieg against those concerns?
Well, I think that some people see those things as a strength because they are people who can distinguish themselves clearly from Trump. And one of the things that I think is strong about Sanders is that he's been the same his entire career. He's different than just about anybody in the race because he can say, he leans in on the socialism aspect, particularly, what he calls democratic socialism. He leans in on that. And I think that that's actually a strength. And this is all going to come to turnout. So whoever can turn out, their base is going to win this thing. I think his sexuality in terms of Buttigieg could hamper him a little bit, but he's strong in the Midwest, which is the place that people are concerned about. He still has the ability to reach a lot of people. I think the problem with Buttigieg is he doesn't excite young people, oddly enough, even though he is the youngest person in the race right now. He doesn't excite young people. He doesn't excite the progressive base. And I think that's what's going to be his downfall. And I don't believe he's going to get the nomination.
Finally, Jason, let's compare the Democrats to President Trump. Trump has raised more money than any Democrat. He has $100 million cash on hand. That's more than any other Democrat. He's not outraising the entire field, though. Democrats in one total are outraising Trump. Trump also not spending that much. For Democrats who are concerned between the campaign and outside groups, will Democrats be able to catch Trump in the money race once there's a nominee, once there's one Democrat left? Should Democrats be worried about the money?
I don't think so. I think there's going to be plenty of money on hand, and hopefully we'll be able to convince people like Bloomberg and others to help out whoever the nominee is. So I'm not, and I really don't think money wins elections. In the last race, Hillary Clinton had 3 times as much money as Donald Trump, and Donald Trump won the election. So it's really about turnout in the right places, and that's about manpower. That's about having the volunteers. That's about registering new voters. That's something that President Obama was really good at in 2008, and that's why he was able to take it home. So we've got to get back to that. We've got to think more about turnout and more about, hitting the streets than it is about raising money for ads and putting ads on TV. That's, part of it, but I think people are making much too big a deal of this fundraising issue.
Jason Nichols is a Democratic strategist and our first 2020 guest here in 2020. Jason, Happy New Year and Happy 2020.
Happy New Year to you.
Up next, the federal government has scientists who study everything from food safety to health issues to climate change and more, but now their numbers are dwindling. After the break, we'll explain why and also how damaging this could be for the nation for years to come.